Perfect. So I would like to welcome everyone to our 2022 Distinguished Alumnus in Residence. This year, we are proud to have Chris Tanay, class of 1996, joining us and soon to impart some fantastic wisdom about his career, his experience. And I think the title says it all. It's never a straight line. Adventures in Media and Business. I think for those of us who have experienced that in our careers, it's a blessing of the Bates education that allows us to be nimble and agile as we start to move through our professional lives. So what I would like to do is just give a brief overview and welcome everyone. So my name is Karen Finocchio. I'm class of 1992. I'm the current president of the Bates College Key. We are joined by Linda Horwitz, who's class of 90, as well as Chris Tiné, who's class of 1996. And most importantly, I would like to welcome all of you, our College Key members, fellow alums, staff, faculty, dear friends, for taking time out of your very busy schedules and joining us tonight. So who is the College Key and what is it that we do? We are an honor-based organization. We are a student and alumni honor organization who are elected by virtue of student leadership in academic or extracurricular work based on their volunteer work for the college. These nominations come from fellow alums will nominate to the Key, as well as faculty and staff for students. You are joined by fellow College Key luminaries who include the late former Secretary of State Ed Muskie, Professor Marcus Bruce, novelist Lisa Genova, poet Elizabeth Hobbs, among many talented other alumni. We are a dues-based organization, and what is fantastic is our dues make meaningful impacts for our Bates students, and DARE is one of the marquee programs that we are able to bring to the Bates College students and the Bates College alumni on whole, because of all the support that you have provided the College Key. As you can see, we have many areas of impact, and we are very proud of the ability to help students, and certainly the ability that we've helped over the past couple of years in horribly uncertain times. So as I've mentioned, we host a Marquee Program, which is our Distinguished Alumni in Residence program. And this program brings together students and alumni to create an opportunity to hear and learn from impactful stories by remarkable alumni. A few recent DARE honorees include HubSpot's Chief People Officer, Katie Burke, Boston Globe editor Brian McGrory, Congressman Jared Golden, Microsoft senior researcher Susan Dumais, and McLean Hospital behavioral genetics researcher Dr. Ed Maloney. We are always looking and interested in learning more about potential DAREs, so please outreach to a member of the executive committee. You can find our information on our website at bates.edu. Because we want to continue to create these wonderful learning opportunities for the broader community. I'm pleased to introduce Linda Horwitz, who will do the introduction to Chris. Linda is a proud class of 1990 who graduated with degrees in rhetoric and philosophy, graduated with high honors, as well as a proud Quimby debate alumna. Professor Horwitz is a former Bates instructor in rhetoric and women's studies, as well as the former acting director of debate. She also has held academic teaching roles at Hamilton College and Loyola University in Chicago. She is currently Chicago-based and is an associate professor of communication and chair of museum studies at Lake Forest College in Illinois. I will pass the torch over to you, Linda, so that you can impart your fantastic words and insights about Chris.
Hello, as you just heard, I'm Linda Horwitz, and I am a graduate of Bates College. I graduated in 1990. It is my pleasure to be able to introduce our distinguished alum, Chris Tanay. As a graduate student at Northwestern, I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to be an instructor for a year at Bates. And while the intention was for me to get some teaching experience while I wrote my dissertation, unfortunately, Professor Bob Branham got ill, and I had to step in as the debate coach and work with his students who are working on their theses. Lucky for me, Chris was one of them. He was a senior, he was writing a thesis on the rhetoric of FDR in his new memorial in Washington, DC, and he was president of the Brooks Quimby Debate Society. He was returning to campus after having an unbelievably successful junior year on the debate circuit. He and his partner, Kwok Tran, ended up #2 in all of the American Parliamentary Debate Association. And if you don't understand what an impressive feat that is, it's hard for me to sort of explain it here today, but they were really, really talented, had a lot of success, and really changed the state of debate at Bates College. My experience as being a debate coach for Chris and his stand and thesis advisor started the 27-year friendship that we have and will continue onward. I'm sure that Chris is usually the smartest, most articulate person in any room he walks into. But what I find interesting about Chris is he's always the kindest, most thoughtful person in the room. Although I was only 5 years older than Chris when I came back to Bates to teach, and I was not as successful as he was either in the classroom or on the debate tour, he accepted me as the coach, and through his leadership, the rest of the debate society did as well. He treated me as a valued teacher, and because of that, I came to see myself that way as well. Unlike me, Chris's path has not been a straight line. From an architecture student to a TV producer to the chief product officer, the common denominator is Chris has always remained the same, only his title has changed. Chris is a producer. He makes things happen. When I first heard he was involved in RIPFest, the short-term collaborative film festival, I thought he'd found his thing. But it turned out it was just another cool project that Chris lent his time and effort to, while learning new skills that would help him on the next step of his ongoing path. For most of Chris's path, he focused on improving people's ability to learn, whether it was using NBC's news as content in the classroom or creating learning platforms in the work world. Chris really focuses on helping us all be better through the learning process. Personally, I've learned a ton from Chris over the years, but the most important thing that I learned is that you can retain your moral center while in the corporate environment. In fact, Chris found that you can create and change the corporate environment and bend it to meet your own moral standards. I'm thrilled that Bates had the forethought to invite Chris to talk with us, and I'm eager to hear him explain how and why his career has taken the path that it did. Please join me in welcoming tonight's distinguished alum, Emmy and Webby winner, Chris Tanay.
And thank you so much. That is a extremely generous introduction. I really appreciate it. I just have been reflecting on 27 years of being good friends and colleagues, and I'm so glad that you can be here. Karen, thank you to you. Thank you to the College Key Executive Committee. Also a special shout out, thank you to Stephanie, who has been incredible at helping organize this and keep the trains running on time. So thank you all. And thank you to everybody who's attending. I can't see all of your faces because of the format that we're using in Zoom, but I can see all your names, and it is an incredible list. Amazing group of friends, some family, and some new colleagues as well, fellow alumni. So great to meet you all, and thank you for spending a little bit of time. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides to share with you today. Hopefully everybody can see that. So when Karen called me up in, I guess it was in December of last year, and said, hey, we'd like you to be the DARE, I thought I had misheard her, and I said, "Wait, you're calling me a dare? How dare you? You can't be serious. You can't. Are you daring me to speak about my career for an hour? That's a tall order." But I am grateful that she asked, and happy to do it. I several times reached out to Karen and said, "Could you please repeat the assignment to tell me again exactly what you want to hear?" And she said, "Really, just talk about your career. Talk about how you got to where you are, and the winding path that you were on." And so that really is what I've tried to do today. I'm going to share probably, I don't know, 40 minutes, 30, 40 minutes of my story, and then I want to reserve a fair amount of time for questions and to have a little bit more of an open dialogue. How did I wind up going from Bates College through television and media production and wind up as head of product development for a large education company? Well, we'll start where business people like to start. I went to business school. I will often refer to myself as the world's most unlikely business school candidate, given my background. But I went to business school and I learned something when I was in business school, and that is business people love graphs. So we're going to start with a graph. That is what most people think of when they think of a career trajectory. That is the career trajectory graph. And usually you think of Bates being down there in the left-hand corner, and you just steadily progress up to the right-hand side to the promised land, retirement. And it just kind of, you end there, and that's great. I think we all know that that's not how it works in real life, right? There is no straight line. It's never a straight line. The graph probably looks something more like that. And not only that, but it doesn't start with Bates and end with retirement. Bates fits itself somewhere in the middle of your life. You go through a million twists and turns. You meet people like Linda, like the people, and Sally. I see Sally now. And the people who are on this webinar, and they shape your life. Doors open, experiences present themselves to you, and it really is up to you to decide what to do with those, and ultimately where you're going to go. And ask yourself the question: what is retirement? Am I even doing that? Or are we going to be, creating new adventures and doing new things for a long, long time, especially out of college? I think, for me, I was talking to some students and staff earlier, and then I was reflecting this afternoon. This is a number that I think about a lot as I have been preparing for this presentation. 27%. 27% of college graduates, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, work in a field that is related to their undergraduate major, which means that the vast majority of college graduates work in fields that are not related to their college major. And so if that is not an argument for building a set of skills in college that then enable you to go out and embrace the journey, I don't know what is. I think probably the most important professional skill, certainly that I've developed, and I think others develop, is the skill of how you embrace uncertainty. And in a world that we are living in now, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's the international situation, whether it's just the ups and downs of the job market, uncertainty is a constant. And so how you embrace that matters. How you take the journey matters. And it helps to have a set of values. There's a guy named Bill George who for many years was CEO of a medical technology company called Medtronic. He's now then became a Harvard Business School professor, and he talks about this concept of your true north. People often talk about values. What do they believe in? What motivates you? What are your goals? What's your mission or your purpose? True north to Bill George, and I think for me is not just your values. It's also, do you know your own value? Do you know the value that you bring into a situation or into a role that you're playing? And knowing that and knowing your set of values helps to orient you. And it helps you to figure out what direction to go when uncertainty presents itself. I certainly didn't have that before I got to Bates. I learned a lot about my values and my value while I was at Bates. But I was given a nudge in that direction by my mom, who is on this webinar tonight. Hi, Mom. Who gave me a nudge out of high school and took the initiative to take out an ad in my high school yearbook, maybe suggesting or proposing some values that I might want to think about. And so she placed this ad in my high school yearbook. I love Gary Larson and The Far Side. As you travel life's highway, don't forget to stop and eat the roses. And, you know, I think about that all the time. She sent it to me again the other day on Facebook. For me, my value, my true north, is not really about the career objective or the end game. It's about how you take the journey. It's about what you make of the experiences along the way. And I think that's just as important as the destination itself. So what I want to share with you now is kind of how that unfolded. And it all started in 1992 when I got to Bates College. First thing I did, went to the college store, bought myself a Bates sweatshirt. Second thing I did, met Jessica Anthony at freshman orientation. We became lifelong friends, still one of my dearest friends, lives in Portland. And I had a undergraduate trajectory. I knew where I wanted to go, sort of. I had taken AP Bio, and I did pretty well at that. I had a science teacher in high school who I liked and inspired me. So I thought, oh, bio major sounds good. And I thought about crew. I thought, this is interesting. We didn't have that in my high school. I didn't really know much about it. So I thought, oh, crew sounds great. This is fantastic. And about 3 days into Bates, I sort of looked at bio classes, and it turns out they had a crazy number of labs that you had to sign up for. So bio major went off the list relatively quickly. And so then I started asking around about crew, and it turned out that their practices started at 5:30 in the morning on the Androscoggin River, which often was frozen or about to be frozen. And so crew fell off the list as well. And that was the first twist in my trajectory once I got to Bates. So I had to start looking elsewhere for where I might go. And I had done a lot of theater in high school, and it was something that interested me. So I got involved in the theater program and the Robinson Players. It's the cast of Oleana, Karen Frost and Neela and a bunch of other people. I got very involved in the Bates Modern Dance program. Some of you might remember Marcy Plavin and Leonard Plavin, incredible mentors to me, and was a lighting designer in the Modern Dance program and very involved with that. And I also explored what became not necessarily a lifelong interest in, but definitely a temporary interest in snazzy pants. So this was my introduction to snazzy pants with Sarah Spitz. Theater was not the end game. It was a really interesting, it was an amazing creative community to be in, and it allowed me to flex some creative muscles. But it was through theater that one day I found myself in Pettigrew Hall looking for a theater department meeting. They were going to do a show, and there was an info session about it. So I went into the lecture hall, big lecture hall, and I sat down like right in the middle of the room. And slowly over the next 10 or 15 minutes, people filled in. And so I was like literally in the middle of the row, people on either side. And I thought, oh, great, this is, we're going to talk about this next production. And this man walked in the room who had round glasses and what can only be described as kind of a Colonel Sanders situation going on, with a big mustache and a little soul patch. And he announced that it was actually a meeting of the debate team. And we were going to see a demo debate presented. And I quickly realized that I was in the wrong place, but it turned out at the right time. So they presented this debate. A bunch of people got up, they argued both sides of an issue. And then before the final vote was taken, they turned to the floor and they invite people in the audience to give what's called a floor speech. And so people gave speeches on pro or con, trying to sway the audience on which way to vote. And Bob pointed at me and said, you give a speech. Like, what do you think? Which side, pro or con? And so I stood up and I gave what has got to have been a rambling and incoherent speech. But he saw something in it. And he came up to me after the meeting and he said, I think you should come to the debate team meeting, later this week. I think you'd be a great fit. And it was the beginning of a twist in my path, a door opened and I walked through it. You know, as Linda shared, had a great run with the debate organization at Bates, ultimately became a rhetoric major. There's a picture of me and Bob with Don Harwood, my partner Kwok Tran over on the right-hand side, another debate partner, my senior year, Lucy Fowler, who I'm still in touch with in Philadelphia. This is after we beat Bowdoin and brought back the Bates-Bowdoin Cup to Bates, to Lewiston. That was pretty exciting. I also stayed on for a little while with Bob, cataloged the whole history of debate at Bates. Bob wrote my senior year was the centennial of intercollegiate debating at Bates, and there was a reunion. Bob wrote an illustrated history of debate at the college, and I helped him with that, with some of the archival work. And rhetoric is still very much the lens through which I look at my profession, through leadership. You know, I'll talk a little bit about you know, some of what I took away from that experience, but suffice to say, it was a pretty pivotal experience, and something that kind of happened by accident. It was an opportunity that presented itself, and I was just in the right place to take the most of it. I took three things really away from the rhetoric program at Bates. I call this section Debate and Rhetoric, or how I learned to stop worrying and love Aristotle. There are Aristotle on rhetoric talks about three components of rhetoric. There is ethos, pathos, and logos. From the Greek words ethics, pity, and logic. And I'm looking at Linda to make sure I'm not messing this up. I got a thumbs up. Ethos is about establishing credibility, getting your audience to trust you. It's a critical component of any kind of public speaking or persuasion. Pathos is about inspiring an emotional response, getting your audience to feel something and be motivated. And logos is about argument based on facts and reasons, getting your audience to think. That was like a light bulb going off for me. That was totally new stuff. And it's something that I think about all the time. I'll talk a little bit about how it's influenced my career, but that was big. The second thing was a really obscure thing called flowing. I was telling Linda and Karen, I actually found a folder over the weekend that contained every flow or set of notes for every debate that I did at Bates, or at least as far as I can tell. I mean, there are literally hundreds of them. But this is a way of taking notes where you lay out an argument and then you think about how that argument evolves from one speech to the next. So PM is the prime minister, LO is the leader of the opposition, member of government, member of opposition. So you go back and forth and you track out how the argument evolves. And that is a skill that I still use every single day. And something that came out of the Bates program, and you know, and was really impactful in my life. And then the third skill, and this is supported by research. CEOs will tell you one of the absolute must-have skills to move up in your career and succeed in business is the skill of being able to sleep anywhere at any time, which is a skill I have perfected. That's waiting for results at the World Championships in Cork, Ireland. Yeah, comes in very handy, especially on airplanes and other forms of public transportation. So, that was my sort of how I got through Bates and got some of what I took out of it. In case you were worried about rowing, I did not get to row crew until I got to graduate school. I did have an opportunity though at Bates to excel at athletics, both in the croquet department, really formidable croquet team, as well as a fantastic softball team that still gets together on a regular basis. And if you need to lean in and read the team name, I will give you a zoomed in picture. We were called Young, Dumb, and Excited, but we had a really good time and got made some really great friendships through Bates. I graduated, went to California. Well, actually went to live with on Linda's couch with Sally for a short time, and then moved to California. And it was while I was out there that I got a call that Bob had put me forward to participate on the United States national debating team tour of the UK and Portugal. So here was somebody from my past, from my network, identifying an opportunity that they thought I was good for, opening that door, and then it was up to me to say yes. And I did say yes. And myself and my partner, Richard, went to the UK for about 6 weeks. I looked forever to try and find a picture of us debating. All I could find was a picture of us arguing over pints of beer. But there, Richard and I, we did have some legit debates. We won what's called the Middle Temple Mace. And more importantly, in my life, I was introduced to the UK, but also to the people who would go on to become my academic advisors in graduate school. And so I applied and ultimately enrolled at the University of Cambridge. And that was the beginning of graduate school. And I moved to the UK for 2 years. And two things were interesting there. I sort of knew I was not going to be an academic, but I got really interested in two things. One, my summer job while I was at Cambridge was teaching. And I started teaching undergraduate students that were in Cambridge for the summer, doing summer courses. So I got really interested in teaching, and you know, Linda told you a little bit about kind of a thread in my career has continued to be education and help people learn. So that was really interesting. The second was filmmaking. The college where I was had a little photo club, but also a bunch of people who were really interested in digital filmmaking. And I got really inspired. And so when I moved back to New York after graduate school, I actually went to work for the company that was running those academic summer programs. It was my day job. But in the evenings, my friends and I would get together and we created a nonprofit organization called RipFest. And RipFest Collaborative Film Project was just that. It was a film project. We got groups of professional filmmakers together who had never met one another, and we paired them up in teams. Each team had a director, a producer, a writer, 2 actors, and they had locations or things that had been prepared for them in advance. And then the teams had 16 days to write original short films from scratch. We actually started selling the tickets for the films before they had even been made. And so I was the executive producer of that with a couple of friends. And it was an amazing lesson, not only in filmmaking, but in collaboration. Teaching other people how to collaborate, learning about collaboration myself, and probably most importantly, embracing constraints. Typically in film, you think about films, you know, somebody writes an amazing, you know, ambitious script, and then studios have to pour hundreds of millions of dollars into finding the locations and building the sets and doing the, you know, CGI and all the rest of it. We sort of reversed that. We said, well, here, these are your locations, here are your actors, so you have to go write the film that best supports that. And it was an incredible lesson in how embracing constraints can actually help you go faster and more creatively. So for example, if a team had as their location a small private airplane, that team made a movie about a small private, you know, airplane, and got to fly that around and have a pretty cool adventure. If the team had access to 11 Radio City Rockettes who owned their own bowling pin costumes and also had a shirt handy that said "Talk is cheap, dance is deep," then that team made a film about the Rockettes, and they were kind of amazing. Some teams didn't have a lot of resources available. They had a shopping cart and somebody willing to stand in it with a camera. So those teams got what they got. And other teams had access to Academy Award winner Olympia Dukakis and Broadway actors Nancy Opel and Joey Collins, who were willing to go hang out in somebody's grandmother's house in New Jersey for a weekend with a turkey that had been cooked 4 days earlier and make a film about Thanksgiving. Everything turned out differently. You never sort of knew what you were going to get with RipFest, but it was an amazing experience and ran successfully for about 14 seasons. And somebody this morning, I was talking to some students and staff, said, oh, it's kind of like you were prototyping your life. You were prototyping what you wanted to do next. I think there's a really great way to describe it. My question after doing this for a couple of years was, like, how do I make my hobby my job and go from something that I'm interested in to something that is part of my career? And so I talked to a number of people who had participated in the films. And that's when I started my career making television. It started in 2004. The very first show I was on was a behind the scenes show about the Democratic primary. My guy, Doug, is the guy with the hair and the camera. I was his producer. He was my cameraman. And we were following John Kerry around for a couple of weeks, doing a sort of behind the scenes documentary about what it's like to be on a presidential campaign. Eventually, I got curious, started poking around, learning camera skills, and then I was the cameraman for a number of shows on the Travel Channel and Discovery. If anybody's a Top Chef fan, you might recognize Milo Matama there on the right-hand side. It was her very first TV show. She's now a chef, a judge on Top Chef on a pretty regular basis. Did a lot of documentary work for the BBC, a lot of undercover. You notice my cunning disguise there, Jeff. That was actually in Chicago. I think I saw Linda and Sally on that trip. We were filming in a cheesecake factory, and I don't mean the restaurant, I mean like an actual factory where they make cheesecakes, which was maybe the best assignment I've ever had. So that was really fun. And then worked for a number of seasons on a program called What Not to Wear. That's Clinton, Kelly, and Stacey London, who we convinced to film on a boat. And if there are any aspiring television producers on this webinar or listening to the recording, I have one word of advice, which is do not make television on a boat. None of us were forgiven for that shoot for several weeks afterwards. Very, very messy. But kind of an interesting set of connections. And then ultimately I wound up at PBS working on a history show called History Detectives. And if anybody's a Antiques Roadshow fan, that's the guy holding the red folder is a regular on Antiques Roadshow. He's named Wes Cowan, and he's a historian and appraiser. And he's carrying this is kind of an interesting shoot. This was a document that was signed by and circulated by Thomas Jefferson to raise funds from people in Washington, D.C. to start the first public school in Washington, D.C. And so we took that document to Monticello and did a documentary about Jefferson and his quest to start the first public school in the nation's capital. So it was interesting. And one of the things that I don't think I was fully aware of at the time, but as I reflect on my time in television was so powerful, were our three friends from Aristotle, ethos, pathos, and logos. Because, what I learned about television and storytelling more broadly is that these three pillars factor in everything you do, whether it's a speech, whether it's a documentary film, whether it's a visual representation, how you tell a story and build credentials is how you keep an audience investing their time to be with you and stay with you. How you inspire an emotional response is how you get an audience to invest themselves emotionally, and how you argue with logic is how you bring them through to a logical conclusion. And so that lesson from Bates carried its way all the way through the work that I did in television. One day, in between shoots for History Detectives, my phone rang when we still did things like call people on the phone before texting. And I got a call from a friend who said, oh, somebody you worked with on What Not to Wear said you are a TV producer and might be available. We are looking for TV producers at NBC News who also are teachers. And you may be the only person in New York who fits that particular Venn diagram. Would you be interested in coming in and talking to us about an education project? And so I went to 30 Rock, not really knowing much about this project, and signed up for what I thought at the time was going to be a 6-month contract to work on a website called IQ. And IQ, spelled ICUE, came out of some research at MIT from a group called the Education Arcade. And the premise was really cool, actually. It was, we're going to take thousands and thousands of clips from the NBC Film and Video Archive going back to the 1920s and 30s. We're going to digitize them. We're going to line them up to the AP government and AP history standards and program, and we're going to use them as a tool that kids can use to get better and ultimately get better at taking the AP exam. So making video content relevant to students. And it was fantastic. It was a really, really cool project. that was an utter failure. It failed for two main reasons. One, there was, it turns out, no business model, which if you're anyone is interested in starting a business, useful to have a business model before you do it. So lesson learned there. Number two, it launched right in the middle of 2008, during the middle of the financial crisis. And we wound up laying off half the staff on one day, including the entire digital products team. And digital products are the people who design the interface and make choices about what functionality is going to be baked into a product. And so an opportunity opened up. Again, a door opened, and I was in a position to say yes to something that I didn't know how to do. And that was learn about product development. And it turns out there are really two things that you need to be rigorous about or think about and own in product development. One is, can you walk a mile in the user's shoes? In this case, students or teachers. And I had walked a mile in teachers' shoes for sure at that point. And the second is, can you think about continuous improvement, or in this case, continuous reinvention? And so for us, there was this opportunity. We invested all this money to digitize all these video clips. The website didn't work. There was no business model. So what do we do with that? And we dug in and talked to teachers, talked to students, and we wound up ultimately relaunching the program under the name NBC News Archives on Demand, which may have been a success from a product perspective, but maybe not from a branding perspective, because it doesn't really roll off the tongue. But the guy there proudly showing off our flyers was the CFO at NBC News, and he was very supportive of the project. And the idea here was take those same video clips, but instead of giving them away to students for free, sell them to schools as a library subscription so that teachers could take clips and associate them to lesson plans and use them in the classroom. And that, it turned out, was a business model, a much more successful business model. And ultimately, that project grew into a whole division of NBC News called NBC Learn. I spent 4 or 5 years traveling the country, talking with teachers, training teachers, working with the different shows at NBC to contribute content and promote the product, working with our talent like Lester Holt and Mika Brzezinski. That's Lester talking to a horde of teachers who have come to see him in Michigan about the role that news and literacy and current events can play in schools. But it all happened because a door opened and I walked through it. I walked into something that I didn't know how to do and figured it out as we went. And ultimately, it was a very, very fulfilling time at NBC. Continuous reinvention continued as we started to grow that business. We thought about, so where else could we contribute in the education space? How can we look for other audiences to talk with? And that led to a project called Education Nation, which was across the country: Philadelphia, Atlanta, Phoenix, Miami, the New York Public Library, and on the rink at Rockefeller Center. You see our sort of stage there set up on the skating rink, where we would bring people together. You see Warren and Susie Buffett, Melinda Gates, Mitt Romney, Barack Obama came to talk about solutions in the education space. And it was a pretty inspiring project to be a part of for a major American TV network to invest that kind of resource in telling the story of education and getting people focused on that. And I had the opportunity to put together a digital team, see them over on the left-hand side, and lead that team as we led the digital coverage for this event, which was pretty exciting. If anybody's a fan of the Serial podcast, it was big for a while. My proudest hire at NBC was the person to my left, that is Dana Chivvis, who, after working for us on our digital project, went on. She was the producer of Serial and still with NPR, National Public, This American Life now. She's a radio producer for This American Life, but very, very successful. And that was a fun project. And then the last piece of reinvention at NBC was, how do we think about other audiences? So we had all these video clips. It was great for social studies teachers and history teachers. You're teaching the civil rights movement. You could go and, pull down Martin Luther King, appearing on Meet the Press and listen to his words rather than read a textbook about it. But the question kept getting asked, well, what about science? What about math? How can we take the resources of NBC and help people learn about science and math and other topics in a way that was a little bit more engaging? And so out of that came a series that went on to be called the Science of Sports, started as the Science of the Winter Olympics during the Vancouver Olympics. And we worked with Leicester and the National Science Foundation to interview Olympic athletes like Julie Chu, women's hockey player, scientists funded by the National Science Foundation and others to tell the behind the scenes story of how physics and material science and biological sciences help athletes perform at the highest levels. And that was really, really exciting. We were nominated for an Emmy Award for that project. We were nominated up against Major League Baseball, the NFL, and professional golf, PGA. And so all of us decided there was no way we were going to win that. And so none of us went to the Emmys, actually. But we had one free ticket. And so we nominated somebody who didn't have plans that night. And they texted us this picture of the Emmys. And about 11 o'clock at night, we got a text saying, "Hey, we won. It's amazing." And that was the story of how we won our Emmy. Interesting thing happens when you bring an Emmy Award to the office. Everybody's so nice. Everybody's so supportive. They're kind. Everybody just wants to help. They want to help pull it in several directions or hit each other with it. No, it was great. It was a big team win, and a big moment for the education group at NBC. And now it lives its life in our apartment, holding Christmas decorations and other things that fit inside the ball that Emmy holds up. So that was the kind of the journey at NBC. And one thing had been nagging me for a long time while I was at NBC, and that was, why did IQ fail and fail so badly? And I wasn't upset about it, but I also wasn't satisfied with the answer that I got. And I realized after several years in television that I didn't really understand the business of NBC. I didn't really understand the business of television. I was carrying the camera and telling the stories and doing all this cool stuff and standing on stage, but I really had no idea how we made money, how the business ran, what were the mechanics of that. And I went and talked to Adam, who was the guy that you saw with the collateral. And I said, I want to go to business school. I want to learn about this. And he was the CFO. And he said, I think that's a great idea. And he sponsored me. And so there, again, the network from the past came forward. He opened a door, was able to sponsor me to go to business school. And I enrolled in the executive program at Columbia and ultimately got my MBA. I think about this experience a lot, and I was thinking about what I wanted to share about going to business school. The first thing I would share is that even at Ivy League business schools, apparently they have no chairs. So we were all sitting on the floor for this photo, and I don't know exactly why, but if you are thinking about going to business school, ask them if they have chairs first. But aside from that, there's a lot of debate about whether business school is worth the investment, whether it makes sense, and so forth. For me, it wasn't so much about the classes. There's a little bit about the network and the people that I met. But for me, the most impactful experience was spending several weeks in India with the business school, with my classmates. And our assignment when we were in India was every day we had to go into another business. We could pick whatever we wanted. And we had to interview the business owner about the mechanics of how they operated their business in India. And it was fascinating. This was a day that we went into a used car business. You see my colleague on the upper left-hand side there walking in. This could not have been, the office that I'm standing in now is probably bigger than this car dealer's office. And we sat with him in the green shirt for probably 3 or 4 hours. And he walked us through how the car business works in India. Where do they get cars from? How do they handle bank transactions in a place where, very few people own a car? How do people deal with things like gas? All these things that we just take for granted, are completely different the way they run their business. And it really generated for me a genuine interest in understanding what makes businesses tick. both the people that make them tick, but also the structures that make them tick. How do companies carry on as a going concern? And there you see, I'm talking to some kids whose cousin had just bought a car. His first car was going to change their family. And it was so interesting just to think about like the impact that these businesses have on those communities, and the impact that all businesses can have on their communities. So it was a profound experience. I think Jeremy Volano is on this webinar. He is kind of responsible for me going to Columbia because he went the year before me, and I just thought that is so cool. Like, Bates guy, former debater, going to Columbia Business School, and so I went into Adam's office at NBC and said, I want to go to Columbia. I think that's a great idea. Jeremy went. I think it's a great idea. And so Columbia has Jeremy Volano, class of '97, to thank for that. So thank you. So here I was, we're kind of wrapping down the time at NBC, just gotten an MBA, was looking for places to go apply a new set of skills. And that's when I landed at a place called Macmillan Learning. I'm holding a dinosaur skull at Macmillan Learning for two reasons. One, because they were an incredible group of scientists and experts, and every day was like going back to school for something, and it was just an incredible environment. But two, because their products were literally like dinosaurs. This was a company that really had focused a ton of time on publishing college textbooks. They were the authorities in most of the fields that they published in. They had the most incredible academics and scholars at their disposal. But when you looked at the products, you were like, oh my God, like that's 500 pages of my life I'll never get back again. And so the value that I brought to them, knowing my value to them, was how do we take an old brand and rethink the content in a way, that is a little more media savvy, to make it appealing to a different generation of users. Walk a mile in your users' shoes. And so I actually reached back into my network. Those are the movie posters there, because the person who had volunteered her time to design those movie posters for us for 14 seasons is actually one of the top UX designers, user interface designers in New York. Also somebody I met through Jeremy Volano, incidentally. And I called her up and brought her across to Macmillan. And I sent out our team out on an interesting challenge. I said, this is what we ultimately wound up with. But I said, I don't want you to benchmark what we're going to design against other learning products. I want you to go walk a mile in the students' shoes who are going to be using this. And we went to Baruch College in New York. And I said, when somebody opens up their Macmillan textbook on their laptop, I want you to look at what else they have on their screen. And far and away, the thing that everybody had on their screen was Spotify, even then. And I said to the design team, let's benchmark the design of our product against Spotify, right? Let's change the equation. Don't, think about who your competitors are and then pick a different competitor to go benchmark yourself against. And that helped this product, help us deliver something that nobody was expecting, that exceeded expectations, that students looked at and found was credible, it was logical, it inspired them. And ultimately it was a very successful product. It was at Macmillan that I started thinking a lot about agility, partly because I was in an engineering organization and partly because it just fascinated me. We worked in these agile sprints, short little 2-week sprints, where you plan your work, you do it, you test it, and then you think about how you're going to plan your next sprint. And I started thinking a lot about how that applied to education, and how we could not only use that in engineering, but how we could use it to structure work that we do in all sorts of different realms. And was lucky enough to go to South by Southwest with another Bates friend, Basil Kalani, who's a ed tech expert. And we did some sessions there, and it was a great opportunity for the Bates network to kind of come together and help us think through how we could take a more agile approach to all kinds of things. From Macmillan, I moved to another legacy media business. This is a company headquartered in Philadelphia called Richardson. It's a sales training company primarily. It was started by a woman named Linda Richardson in about 1978, 79. She's an adjunct professor at Wharton. And all 5'4" of her would get on the train in Philadelphia and go up to Wall Street. In the 1970s, and she started coaching Wall Street bankers on interpersonal skills. And she developed what she calls the 6 critical skills: presence, relating, questioning, listening, positioning, and checking for feedback. And they are the silver thread that runs through everything that she developed. She went on to write several New York Times bestsellers, and was very, very successful, ultimately sold the business. But the same thing persisted at Richardson. This was the content when I got there. It was just this amazing hodgepodge of really, really good stuff, really important concepts, but with no logical flow. So task 1 was build a flow. Go back to debate days, figure out how each piece fit together, figure out the logical argument, and streamline the content. These were the materials. They were literally bullet points, spiral bound together, not inspiring anybody. So think about, how do we, what's the ethos, pathos, and logos of those materials? How are we going to build something that's more credible, more inspiring? Walk for a minute in the shoes of a salesperson who has to go through this training. Is this going to be credible, interesting, and inspiring, and actually based in reason and fact? And so we started totally redeveloping what we do in the industry, and redesigned all of our materials to look and feel more like a magazine, be rooted in infographics and data, think about using quotes and other things to inspire people. We walked a mile in sellers' shoes, and they told us, it's great to read about selling, but it's a human endeavor. It's a human activity. Show me what good looks like. So I reached back into my TV toolkit and started filming scenarios to put sellers kind of in the action, and show them what better conversations look like. Once we made the videos, then the question was, well, how do we distribute those? What does a mobile experience look like? How do you consume this content anytime, anywhere? So I went back to the team at Macmillan that had developed that platform based on Spotify, and we developed a new digital platform that there I am testing it on an airplane, on my way back from a work trip, and created this kind of consumer grade digital experience. And then one of the things about product development, which I love the most, is you have to go out and talk to customers and hear what they have to say, hear what users have to say. And that was straight up debate. Get up on a stage, go talk to big groups of people, listen to their feedback. And I just loved it. So that was my experience up until 2020. And then 2020 happened, and everything stopped. The world stopped. And we not only encountered COVID, but 2020, that should read 2020, or the year I learned to lead and motivate teams through a merger and during a pandemic. We actually merged with our biggest competitor in January of 2020. And by March of 2020, the entire company was remote. And so for me, the challenge was not a product challenge. It was thinking about human beings in this circumstance. And, how do you not only help people through the incredible change that COVID brought, the change of working from home, the stress of being in one room for several weeks at a time, not having any human interaction, being entirely on Zoom. I know you all know exactly what this feels because we all went through it together. But then also the stress of merging 2 companies together. There's an incredible amount of unknowns. Am I going to keep my job? Is my job going to be the same? What are we doing? Who are we? What's our mission? What's our purpose? Why do we exist? And all of that had to be managed remotely. I learned 2 really important things through that experience. One is a piece of neuroscience that we actually teach in our sales training programs, but I actually found it to be incredibly valuable for how I think about working with and managing people. And that is that self-determination theory tells us that we all have 3 really fundamental needs. Autonomy is the need to be masters of our own destiny, to feel like we have some control over our situation, whether that's personal or professional. Competence is the importance of believing and feeling like we are good at what we do, and we understand what it is that we're doing. And in a virtual environment, it is incredibly easy to unintentionally make somebody feel not competent. And so how you lean into managing that, particularly virtually, is so critically important. And then relatedness is a fundamental human need that we have to feel connected to something bigger and more important. Some people call it purpose. Some people call it mission-driven work. Bates calls it purposeful work. But it's a real thing, and people need to feel like they are connected, and Zoom makes that really hard to do sometimes. No dig on Zoom, great company, but I actually dug back into Linda's 6 critical skills. It was for us all about reimagining how we were going to do these things. How do you demonstrate presence virtually? What does relating and building rapport look like when you can't be in the same room with somebody? How do you demonstrate to somebody that you're actually listening to them when all you have to show is, the body language from the middle of your chest to the top of your head? There are real challenges, and we had spent a year leaning in and really thinking about how we could help people be more effective, both personally and professionally, and how I could be more, effective as a leader by taking a new twist on old skills. And the second thing that I walked away with, and I keep this piece of paper on my desk at all times, no matter where I work, is Maya Angelou, her quote that stays with me always, and that is that, particularly when people are alone, particularly when they're in a virtual environment, they will very quickly forget what was said on a meeting or in a conversation. They will forget what you did, or in many cases, they might not even know what you did because you're not in an office anymore. You're not seeing everybody every day. So many things are happening behind the scenes. But how you make people feel is the difference between people who are able to lead teams and inspire teams and people who really just manage them. Steve Jobs sometimes says, management is convincing people to do things they don't want to do, and leadership is inspiring them to do things they didn't think they were capable of doing. And how you make people feel is how you lead. And there are, those skills were a big lesson for me, particularly in the pandemic. They were there in the background before COVID, but it really drew them into stark relief over the last 2 years, for sure. And that kind of brings us to where I am today. The workplace has changed. Everything has changed. That's my team. Some of them I have never, actually, there is one person on my team who I've never met in person after 2.5 years. Several people who I haven't seen in years, even if they, live 20 miles down the road. But work is changing, and what we do as a learning organization has to change along with that. How we innovate, how we make learning relevant for people in the new environment. And so actually where I've gone back to is thinking about Agile again, and thinking about how agility helps us embrace uncertainty, helps us break work down into smaller, more manageable tasks, makes us feel a sense of autonomy because we can control what happens in 2 weeks. We can't control what happens in 2 years. Makes us feel competent because we can see our work being delivered at the end of every sprint. And makes us feel part of something because agility at its core is all about teams. And so we have actually developed, my part of the organization has developed a whole new approach to helping business professionals, salespeople, managers, coaches, embrace concepts of enterprise agility. And as we think about how the future of work is changing, we're really leaning into helping organizations rethink not only what they teach and the skills that they develop with their teams, but how they teach it and how they engage people. And then slowly but surely, travel is coming back, public speaking is coming back. And what I spend a big part of my time doing now is talking with clients, talking with customers, talking with industry leaders about what is changing, how we can embrace new approaches. And I love nothing more than being on the road. It is starting to come back, and I find myself more and more frequently drawing on that last important debate skill of being able to sleep anywhere, mostly on an airplane. So I think that's all I wanted to share about my career. A couple of just final thoughts as I close, and would love to take some questions. I was thinking about, I hate words of wisdom, but I was thinking about like, how do I net this out? Like, what do I sort of take away from this at the end of the day? Your network is the engine that drives your career. I fundamentally believe that. It's about the people that you've worked with, the people you know, the people who feel good because they've worked with you, who want to do things for you. They want to open doors, and you have an opportunity through your network to walk through those doors. When those opportunities present themselves, then the next thing is, are you ready to say yes? You know, so frequently I hear people say, well, I want to get to this point in my career, so I got to go put this piece in place, and then the next piece in place, and then the third piece in place, and then in 20 years, I'm going to be the CEO. And that's one way to do it. It's a hard way to push a stone up a hill, though. Another way to get there is to look at those opportunities and always be in a position to think about whether you're ready to say yes to that. Am I able to walk through that door when that door opens up? The third thing is how you do the work is just as important as the work that you do. And I truly believe that, particularly as a leader or as a manager, how you bring your team along with you. Nothing is more important than that. And that's what feeds your network, but it's what allows us to find purpose in the work that we do. It's not just, you know, the outcome, the quarterly results, the bonus that you get. It's the human connections you make. It's the people that you develop in their careers. You give them opportunities. You help them be better in their roles. And that for me is just critically important. And then the last is, and I need to remember this more and more for myself, but it is true. And I appreciate the folks this morning who reminded me of it. You can prototype your next career step. If you don't know where you're going, you can prototype that. You know, you take it up as a hobby and try it. You volunteer. You put yourself out there to do something different, and then you test it and you say, hey, you know, is this hobby ready to be my next step or not? I'm prototyping things right now. I went to guitar building school a couple of months ago. Totally cool. Built a guitar from scratch, never done it before. Determined that it's not going to be my next career move, but it's a pretty cool guitar. I don't know how to play it, but I like it. And so, you know, that brought me a lot of joy. Been doing a lot more with my photography. So prototyping my next career step as well. And then the final thought, your Bates network is your forever network. These are the people that help form you, the people who know what your true north is, even if you don't. And I hold them as some of the very dearest people in my life. I wouldn't trade the Bates experience for anything, and it absolutely set me up for what I've accomplished and where not only where I am, but where I'm going. So thank you all very much. And if you have questions, I'd be delighted to talk to you about them.
Chris, thank you so much. You know, obviously very inspiring, fascinating, how one kind of step led to the next, and certainly not linear by any means. No. I do have a question because, and it comes to your final thoughts, is when the opportunities arise, you know, are you ready to say yes? Sometimes it's really difficult to even understand what that opportunity may be because of the pressures of, oh, well, I need X income, or I should have X title. So are there words of advice that you can share about discerning opportunity and kind of your decision, a little bit into your decision-making process of really how to take that leap of faith when it can be really scary? It's that risk-averse behavior, you know, recognizing the opportunity and then recognizing, okay, yeah, I can do this even if there's trepidation around it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible question. First of all, I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to gloss over or be naive about the financial pressures that face students when they come out of college. I mean, it is bonkers. And I faced it myself when I came out of Columbia. Great slide, told a nice story about Columbia. I also came out with, you know, 6 figures worth of graduate school debt, you know, coming out of that experience, and then had to figure out, you know, how was I going to use that as a motivator to go take the next steps and, ultimately get myself out from under that, which I was able to do. So I'm grateful for that. I think back to a friend of mine. I'm going to say something maybe a little bit off color for a second, but I had a friend who was a TV producer with me named Kyle, and he was a freelance guy, and he kept what he called his, pardon my language, FU fund, which was 3 months salary in reserve that he built up over time. And it was his cushion. It was his security net to say, when the next opportunity comes, I've got this little buffer that is going to enable me to not have to worry about it. You still have to worry about it, but it's going to enable me to have some emotional security and safety to not have to disrupt my life to take this next step. That I've always kept one. I think it's incredibly helpful. It gives you, you keep it separately from your, rest of your bank accounts and stuff like that. And it does make it easier to make some decisions. And the other is, what is its cost benefit analysis? What is this going to cost me if I do this thing? And is there enough benefit on the other side of it to make it worthwhile? And for everybody, that's a little bit different. But I think if you write it down, what I have found more often than not is that when you start to write it down, the costs are actually not usually as great as you think. And so, if you can separate the emotional component of change from the actual costs of change, and compare it to, what might be on the other side of that, more often than not, I've found that gives me the confidence to step out and try a different direction. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, no, it aligns. I say, just from the path that I've had, it was about recognizing opportunities, and the older, wiser me likes to think of it that way. The young, stupid me was like, hey, this looks like really cool. It's something really cool. And so it's fascinating to also learn about how decision-making comes in. We do have a very important question.
Yeah. Oh, I'm browsing the chat now. I see some of them.
Yes, Bob Branham, the bee's knees or the cat's pajamas?
Yeah, no, I'm thinking about Bob's knees and Bob in pajamas, both of which are probably not really where I need to go right now. I'm going to go with the bee's knees. I don't know, something about Bob. I'm going to pick bee's knees.
Fantastic.
Final answer.
We do have a question from Yaya Fairley. It says, can you speak specifically to your lived experiences as an openly queer or gay white male identified person in its benefits and limitations to your expansive career, and what are you thinking of in helping other LGBTQ Bates alums, perhaps through professional networking, etc.?
Yeah, it's a terrific question. I appreciate it. Yeah, Linda Horowitz was the first person I came out to at Bates, and helped me through that process. And I am incredibly grateful to my Bates network for the support that I had during that time. Maybe it's because I'm in media. Maybe it's because of the time that I was entering the workforce. And it is also possible that it is because I am a cisgendered white male, that I have not found being openly gay to be a direct hindrance to my career. But that having been said, I would always rather put it out there and be upfront about it than have people find out after the fact and feel like I, was either hiding it or not being truthful about something. So I, have always kept a picture of Michael on my desk, my partner, Michael. I've always, talked about my personal life and not my personal life, but, my life at home with my colleagues. And I think I have tried to be the first one to raise it in any new work situation, so that it takes the pressure off of colleagues a little bit, but also so that I'm able to sort of define the terms on which we're talking about it. And as far as helping, others from Bates, I'd be delighted to talk to people if you'd like to network. I, talked to Larry and the Pride Network, and I know he, shared shared this session with other folks, been active with them in New York as well. So yeah, very happy to talk to folks about their career and help if I can.
Fantastic. So I don't see any other questions coming in.
There was
but-
one question about the news business I saw.
Oh, sorry, you are correct.
Do you want me to, can I answer that one?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. So the question that was asked was, I see that you worked in news for some time. I currently work in news, and I was wondering where you think this industry is going.
I don't know where the industry is going. I think if any of us did, we would, we'd all like to know. But I will say this, I am not pessimistic about the news industry for several reasons. One, the business model of the news industry has evolved several times just in the last 10, 15 years. It is incredibly resilient. And two, because there are a lot of really interesting startups in the news business that are showing the older, more established players how it can be done. Vice News is one that I think of a lot. A guy that I worked with at NBC Learn, who's actually our production assistant. He's like the guy who drove the truck and carried boxes, and he's a great guy, young, right out of college. Is now a producer and cameraman, a war correspondent for Vice News. He's in Kyiv right now. He, every other week it seems he's in Afghanistan or somewhere. He's an incredible guy. Vice News is, they're lighter, they're more nimble. They're still out there news gathering, but they're doing it without the weight and the bulk and the infrastructure that some of the legacy news organizations have built up. NBC is trying to innovate, and disrupt itself from within. They've launched NBC News Now, which is a whole digital news division separate from the operations of the regular news division that is, making a great go at it and showing that news can still be profitable. So I do think there's some hybrid coming at some point, which is a kind of a hybrid between for-profit news and not-for-profit news. But I think there's room for both in the marketplace, and I'm pretty optimistic about the future of news.
Great. Thank you for reminding me about that last question. It came in early. I don't see any others that are popping in, but we'll just give it a couple more seconds to see if anyone has anything else. But again, I really am so appreciative on behalf of the College Key and certainly my fellow executive committee members. Thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. We were thrilled to extend the offer for 2022 distinguished alumnus and residents, and just phenomenal words, phenomenal advice. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor, and yeah, love to stay in touch with the Key and with the folks who are on this session as well.
Fantastic. So I think we'll wrap up for tonight, but before we do, again, I would not be, it would not be true to my core to be incredibly thankful for the amazing work from Bates College. We work together and partner with the college on our programming, and a big shout out to Chris for your time, and Linda for your time and your wonderful introduction, Steph Dumont and Meredith LaChapelle, the other members of the advancement team and purposeful work teams. Thank you so much for again, helping us coordinate this really remarkable event. And please don't hesitate to outreach to any members of the executive committee if you have questions or ideas. We are welcome and welcome to hear any and all thoughts. So thank you very much. And wherever you are in the world, enjoy your evening, morning, midday. Again, thanks again for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.